All right. Today, I'll be explaining you about the methods of psychology. So let's go from the beginning. Okay, so these are the methods of psychology. That means the methods that we follow in psychology. Okay, so the first is case history. Case history. Now here there are altogether, we'll be studying 5 methods of psychology today. So out of that, the first is case history. Second is naturalistic observation. Third is survey method. Fourth, experimental method. Fifth is correlation method. Okay, so let's go to the first one, case history. An in-depth study of one person. So an in-depth study of one person means, so where we study about a particular person in depth. So we go deep into that person and study about the in and outs of that person. Okay, that is called case history. So in a case study, nearly every aspect of the subject's life. So subject means what here? Who is called the subject here? Who is the subject here, Rahman?
The mind?
No, actually, the subject means the person, or if you are doing a case study, right? The person whom I am using is called the subject. Now, if I am doing a case study on you, right? If I want to study about you, right? What I do is, you are the subject here. Do you understand? So you will be the subject and I am studying about the subject. Okay, that is what is meant by subject here. Okay, so in a case study, nearly every aspect of the subject's life and history is analyzed to seek patterns and cause for the behavior. So what we do is we study about the subject's life and how his patterns are resulting in his behavior. So what we do is we study the subject, right? And we analyze the patterns of him and how it results in his behavior. So that is called case study. The hope is that learning gained from studying one case can be generalized to many others. So what they do is, now for example, just think, now if they are studying, if you take a classroom of grade 10 or grade 11, if it can be a specific grade of where students of similar age are there. Okay, so if you take grade 10 students, what we do is we do a case study on one student. Okay, we do a case study on one student. Actually, I'm talking about the hope. So they believe by doing a case study on one person, so they can apply the same result to all the other students in the same class. Actually, what happens is, the hope is that the learning gained from studying one case can be generalized to many others. That is their hope. But unfortunately, case studies tend to be highly subjective. What do you mean by highly subjective? One case study is unique only for that subject. So it won't know if I for example, if I'm doing a case study on you, right? So your case study will be totally different from another person case study. Now, if I do a case study on one of your friends, that those two will be different. Okay, so because your patterns and your behavior is totally different from the other. So you cannot have a case study, you cannot do one case study on one person, on one subject, and you cannot give the end result to the other people, other subjects, right? So it is unique. That is called subjective, right? Unfortunately, case studies tend to be highly subjective. Okay, and that means highly subjective means it's unique for the particular subject, and it is difficult to generalize result to a larger population. So this is a negative fact of case study. So when you are using this method of case study, what happens is, like, for a large population you cannot use, but for an individual person or a small group, then you can use this method as case study method to in the psychological investigations. Do you understand? The next, naturalistic observations. Yes, this is one method. The second method, naturalistic observations. Naturalistic observation is a method of observation commonly used by psychologists, behavioral scientists, and social scientists that involves observing subjects in their natural habitats. So, you know that when you can observe a subject, that means a particular person's behavior, the accuracy will be high if that person is in his or her natural habitat. Now, you just tell me now, when you're at home, right, is it comfortable staying at your home, or is it comfortable going to one of your relations' place and staying? What is more comfortable?
My place.
Exactly. Why is that?
Because I'm used to be.
Yes, you are used to that environment. And what else? Because actually that is your natural habitat, because your behaviors and everything are very, you're adapted to that environment, right? So when you suddenly change, so that is what they say, if you want to use this method, naturalistic observation method, we should use the subject in their natural habitat itself. You can't, if the subject is not in their natural habitat, you can't use this method. That is what they mean. Researchers take great care in avoiding making interferences with the behavior they are observing by using unobtrusive method. Unobtrusive research refers to data collection method that do not interfere with the subject under study. Now here, remember, in a case study, what happens is the researchers should interfere with the subject. Okay, they should follow, they should go deep here, in depth of study. You have to study deep about that person. So this method is different. But when it comes to naturalistic observation, unobtrusive research means where the data we collect data from the subject, right? But that do not interfere with the subject. Okay, so we don't directly interfere with the subject. So we collect data from the surrounding only. Okay, objectively studying events as they occur naturally without intervention. So you just we have to observe very carefully, and when any changes occur within the subject, we just observe that and we record it. So that is how this type of research method takes place. Next one is the survey method. Okay, survey method is actually some sort of a planned method. Okay, survey is a method of scientific investigation in which a large sample of people answer questions about their attitudes or behavior. So what they do is they do a survey, right? That means you can now even when you take this before an election or so, what do? They first do a survey. Okay, they carry out a survey to to figure out what are the needs and wants of the people in that particular area. So what they do, it's applicable for a large group of people as well. Right, so steps in survey research. So these are the steps in survey research. So first, what you have to do is you have to determine what you want to study. Okay, so you should have a specific idea on what you want to study. The next one is you have to define the population to be studied. So there should be a specific population where you are going to study, right? So it should be very specified. When you are carrying out a survey research, these are the main steps that you have to follow. The first thing is you have to determine what actually you want to study. Next one is you have to define the population. The third step is you have to design, construct, pilot, and refine the survey instruments. Okay, what are the instruments that you need to carry out your survey research? Next, select a representative sample. Okay, so out of the population, you have to select a representative sample. Next is administer the survey, right? You have to administer the survey, and then finally you have to analyze, interpret, and communicate the results. So these are the steps. Because survey research is carried out in a step-by-step process. Okay, survey research is carried out in a step-by-step process. Next, the next method is experimental method. Okay, the experimental method involves manipulating one variable to determine if changes in one variable cause changes in another variable. So what they do is they manipulating one variable to determine if changes in one variable causes changes in the other variable. This method relies on controlled methods, random assignment, and the manipulation of variables to test hypotheses. So do you know about the scientific method? Did you all study in the previous foundation level? Did you study about the scientific method? Do you
No,
have any
sir.
idea? No. Okay, I'll just give you a brief explanation about scientific method. Actually, scientific method is a method where you come to a conclusion using the steps. Okay, the first thing is you observe. Okay, the second step is you observe using your senses. You have senses like the eye for vision, ear for hearing, right? So you observe using these sensors, and next you gather information, right? You collect information, and then you check whether this information is correct, right? You do experiments and check whether this information is correct. You collect data, and you have to experiment whether this collected data is correct, right? And then only you have to formulate a hypothesis. Okay, a hypothesis means what? Assumptions. We call it as assumptions. So you assume. I'll give you a good example. Right now, just imagine now, if there is a fire in front of your house, okay, now just think one of the buildings in front of your house is on fire. Okay, so at once when you see that, what is the first thing that comes to your mind?
I have to save my life first.
Yes, you have to save your life. Okay, no, I mean like yeah, that's correct, but I'm telling like, now when you look at that fire, right, it's a bit far away from your home, but you can, okay, what is the first thing? Okay, how did this fire occur? What is the first thing that comes to your mind? You will assume,
To help
right?
others. Yes.
Yeah, you will assume, okay, this might have had occurred due to this, right? Or else there might be an electric shortage, right? Or else there might be someone would have purposely done this, okay? Or else there might be a gas leakage, okay? So people actually what they do is they assume, okay? So that is called as hypothesis, okay? So that is called where you assume. So what is a collection of hypotheses? We gather these hypotheses, and then what do? The next scientific method is we test which is correct, which is this is the method where the police use during a crime scene. Actually, this scientific method, you can just Google and see, write it down, and later you can Google and see what is the scientific method. Actually, you can use that even to your personal life. Right now, for example, just think now, if you are scoring low marks in your exam, continuously you are scoring low marks, right? Even you study, you are scoring low marks. So you can apply this scientific method to your life. You can apply this scientific method to your life, and you can make changes in your life. So scientific method is the most acceptable method, where it's a proven method, where results are very positive. Okay, so even the police use this scientific method in a crime scene. So first what they do, they observe, then second, what do? They gather data. You know that they go to people nearby and they talk. Okay, did you see this person? What happened at night? At what time this happened? Have you seen? They collect data, right? So that is also,
Yes.
yeah, that is one part of this scientific method. So I won't go deep into that. You better just refer to that, Google it and see. An experiment is a study of cause and effect. Okay, the cause and effect, that is called an experiment. So simply we can say, what is an experiment? It is a study of cause, and what is cause and effect? What is the reason and what is the effect? That is called an experiment. We study about it, and that is called experiment. It differs from non-experimental method in that it involves the deliberate manipulation of one variable while trying to keep all the other variables constant. So here in this experimental method, what they do is they, for example, now just think we take A and B, okay? We take A and B parts, okay? And we change the environment of A. I'm just taking an example, okay? Now if there are two people, we just take as two people, okay? Now I change the environment or the surrounding of the person A, right? And what they do is, by changing A's environment, they are trying to find out whether B will change. by changing the environment of A, they are expecting B to change. Right? They are trying to figure out whether B is giving out some changes, right? Or else they are changing the environment of B and they are checking whether the environment, whether A has some changes due to the change in B. So that is how, by keeping one stable, the other one they are changing. So that is called the experimental method. So experiment means there should be some sort of comparison. One should be constant, the other one should be changing. So that is how they use this experimental method. Correlation. Correlation means a mutual relationship or connection between two or more things. Okay, so correlation. Correlation, it just actually we can divide it into two by putting a dash here, right? So correlation means a mutual relationship or connection between two or more things. So this is also one type of method where we use in psychology. Correlation studies are used to look for relationship between variables. So what they do is they are trying to identify the changes that occur between correlated things, like interrelated things. Okay, so there are three possible results of a correlation study. So when we do a correlation study, now, for example, we can take a married couple. So by studying the relation, it's a correlation. Okay, by studying a married couple, right? So because they are related to each other, interrelated. Okay, so by now we can see now after about 5-6 years of marriage life, there will be problems within their family. Okay, so at that time when they go to counseling or something, what they do is they can use this correlation method to identify. Okay, there are three possible results of correlation study. The first is a positive correlation, second is a negative correlation, and third is no correlation. So let's see what these correlations are, the results. The correlation coefficient is measured of correlation strength can range from -1 to +1. So this is the range, -1 to +1. That is the correlation range. So a positive correlation means both variables increase or decrease at the same time. Now just think A and B. Okay, A and B, if they are increasing and decreasing at the same time. Now if one is increasing, the other is also increasing. Right? We call it proportional. Right? Now if you take a relationship, right, if a husband and wife relationship, you can see now if one person is angry, the other person also gets angry. So that is a positive correlation. If other one is calm, the wife also will become calm. So it's some sort of we call it as a positive. I just give an example. So what we study is if A is increasing, B also will increase. If B is decreasing, A also will decrease. So that is called as correlation. And the correlation coefficient close to, it's approximately close to +1, right? So +1 if it is close to +1, or if it is +1, we call it as a positive correlation. So next is negative correlation. Negative correlation means it's vice versa to the positive correlation. So it indicates the amount of variable increases and the other decrease. If A increases, B decreases, and vice versa. So if B decreases, A will increase. So that is what happens in a negative correlation. All right. So the correlation coefficient in a negative correlation is -1 or close to -1. So positive, negative, and no correlation. No correlation means it is a range between -1 and +1. So positive means +1, negative means -1, and no correlation means and a variable between +1 and -1. So did you understand?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this one next class we'll be studying about the contributors of psychology. I think I shared you this slide. Did I share this slide to you? First class I shared it to you.
Yes, I have those slides.
You have this, no? Okay, so you can better go through this contributors of psychology. So we will study that the next class. Okay, and here yeah, so this is what we studied: methods of psychology. We studied about case history, naturalistic observation, survey method, experimental method, and correlation. So now I want to go through with your the spot examination which I gave you. Okay, I saw the answers and it's marked. I will send you the results. Okay, you have not answered question number 3. Why is that?
Yes. I didn't get the question properly.
Okay, let me share that paper. Okay. Yeah. Can you see the screen? Is the screen clear? Is the screen clear, Rahma?
Yes, but I can't see the third one. Only the first and the second.
Oh, yeah. No, you can see the screen, right? Okay, right.
Yes.
All right. Okay. So now, so according to your answer, right now, since it's a first examination, spot exam, so I'll just let me explain you about the spot examinations. Spot examinations are actually it is an examination method, a psychological proven method where it can really determine your knowledge. So that is why we have to be prepared for when we come to a class. Always remember, not only for this, for whatever the studies you are going, it can be for any course, right? Anything, you should be prepared, pre-prepared, because a spot examination is something which determines you, okay, what is immediately in your mind. So because this won't come with a prior notice, they won't say, okay, you have an examination on this date, this time, because this usually in university system, they do this. They have spot examinations, because at that time they tell, okay, now I'll be giving you a paper, you have to answer this, because at that time only you can understand, okay, how much of knowledge have you grasped in your brain, in your mind, okay, how much of effort you put to study the subject. Okay, so now here, this type of questions, always remember in the future when I give you type of questions, what you have to do is you have to always first, now if you have given 4 questions and 1 hour, first you read the questions, read all the 4 questions or whatever the number of questions you have, read it, right? And you mark with a pencil you prioritize the questions. Okay, what is the question that I can score more marks? Now here, of course, it's equally divided into 4, but there are some questions where you can get 5 marks and there are questions where you can get 25 marks. Okay, in that case, first you choose the questions with high marks, and then you have to mark the questions where you feel easy. So the first 5 to 10 minutes of your time given to answer the paper, you have to read the questions carefully, either 2, 3, 4 times, no problem, you read it, right? And then you underline or mark the questions which are easy to you, right? And then attend to the easy questions first, right? Many students, what they do, they go according to the order 1, 2, 3 and 4. That is not the proper way of answering a question paper. So you have to first, sometimes the 4th one might be easy for you, so answer that, because you need marks, not the order. So the lecturer, the examiner will mark it anyway, because if the number of the question is marked clearly, and if the question is answered in one paper, yes, clear, then you'll be getting the full marks. Okay, the answers which I saw according to in your paper was actually not enough. So because you have completed the whole paper in one paper, and I will show you some of my other students, the same paper I gave last week to them, right? So they also have done the answers. I'll share you the answers to you. I'll share the answers to you. You just go through them. And so what you have to do is you have to explain the answers in detail. So that is the mistake that I saw in yours. So you have to explain, and also better you write it in point form rather than paragraph. Okay, so even it can be, how do structuralism and functionalism differ? So in that case, some of my other students, they have prepared a table and done. So that actually that is not accepted in a level like this, right? When you're studying a level higher studies, you should not use this table method. So you have to use explanation methods. I mean, like structuralism, you first write the topic, then explain what is structuralism, then you write functionalism, and then explain what is functionalism. In a point form you can write. Okay, so then even the examiner could easily mark your answers. So we should write in a way, we should think as an examiner. Okay, will it be easy for the examiner to mark my paper by writing paragraphs and paragraphs? The examiner is also a human being. Sometimes they might not give good marks if you're not organized. So when you're writing in a point form, that shows that you are well organized. Okay, that is one point that you better write it down, because the next time when you are writing an answer, you have to follow these steps. So you have to be well organized when you're answering a particular. So the first tip that I gave you is you have to prioritize the questions. Second one, you have to be well organized. That means you have to have a structure. Now just imagine, take your body. Okay, if you don't have a skeletal system, what will happen? How will your body be? Now just imagine a person without a skeletal system. How will that person be?
It feels like milk.
Yeah, exactly. It will be like a jelly. Okay, so similarly, even a question. So skeleton means it's a structure. So always remember, when you are answering a question, there should be a structure for the answer. You have to first figure out a structure. Okay, first point, I'm going to write this. Second point, I'm going to write this. The third point, I'm going to write this. It should be well organized. Okay, so since the first one, no problem. But the next you have to be very careful on that. Okay, so and the second question is, why shouldn't we rely on intuition to answer questions about human behavior? Okay, can you tell me what is intuition? In a simple term, tell me what is intuition?
Without having any experience.
We can say like this. In simple words, we can say it as gut feeling. Have you heard about it? Right.
No.
Now, some at times you might have felt this, that all the people around will tell you not to do a particular thing, but your gut will tell, your internal feeling will tell, no, you have to do this. Have you felt a situation like that?
No, sir.
You haven't. Okay, so I have felt many times, because so actually that is not logical. So sometimes it can go wrong, because because the percentage is very low where it goes wrong, but you cannot 100% rely on your intuition. Okay, because it's called intuition, means gut feeling, your inner thought, inner mind feeling. Okay, the feeling which comes within your inner gut. Okay, so that is some students, what they do is, simply I'm telling you, why shouldn't we rely on intuition to answer questions about human beings? So the question is, they're asking, why shouldn't we rely on intuition? Okay, why shouldn't we rely on intuition to answer questions about human behavior? But many students, they have given the answer, what is intuition? Right? They have given intuition is this and this, and intuition is not logical, this and that. They have given answers in that way. So actually you have to, and also remember, when you are answering the question, in between, have the habit of reading the question again and again while you're answering. Okay, that is a very good habit where you have to follow. Not even only in this examination, in whatever the exam that you're writing, while you're answering, read the question at least 2 to 3 times again and again. Okay. So the third question is, what are some of the differences between collectivists and individualists? Okay. Usually we can say collectivist cultures are usually, now a collectivist means where a group of individual people, right? A group of individual people forms a collectivist culture, right? And when it comes to an individualist culture, means a culture of one particular person. So they're asking the differences. Okay, so you can just Google it and see what is the difference between a group of individualist cultures and what is the difference between an individual person's culture. How a single person's culture would be, and how a group of people together would be. Okay, so that culture, it's in the internet. You can just write, you can just type as collectivists and individualist culture. Just Google it and see, you will get the proper answers for that. Right, and the next is the fourth one. What are the key elements of psychodynamic cycle? That one you have already studied. Okay, you have already studied about that. So in the future, when you all are getting this spot examinations, always remember that you have to follow the steps which I told you. First is prioritize your questions, right? And then second is answer the simplest question, right? And third is you better as usual. So it doesn't need to, you don't need to answer all the questions in order 1, 2, 3, 4 kila. You don't need to answer. You can answer anything randomly. You can select and answer whatever the easy questions that you have. Okay, first you answer the easy questions, next you answer the question that carries more marks. Okay, and that is how you have to step by step go. And also when you're answering a question, take a pencil, first draw the structure. Okay, first point I'm going to answer this, second point I'm going to answer this, right? And when you're answering, always reread the question. Okay, again and again you read the question while answering the question. Okay, so these are the tips that I can give you in order to score good marks in your upcoming examinations. Okay, so any doubts of today's lecture, Rahma?
No, sir.
All clear, right? So shall we wind up the session for today?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, then thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, welcome.